Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, April 21st, 2026, and today we're taking on a true whale of a tale and learning reciprocity, and we're going to cover contamination in municipal compost. And do you need a soil probe? We'll find out. So let's do it. All right, everyone, welcome to Tilth Tuesday, your weekly reminder that you can get living soil compost and potting mixes from the bona fide nerds over there at Tilth Soil. Check out Nathan on the Composter Podcast, Season 4, Episode 3, or head to tilthsoil.com to learn more. I hope everyone is doing fine this lovely second day of the week, depending on when you start your weeks, I guess. I transplanted some Roma-style beans yesterday under some row cover, of course, because it's like 39 degrees tonight, but just keeping it warm enough. And that's not because beans are meant to be a big part of our cropping, but I just love me some green beans. And I thought, it would be nice to have a little bit on offer for some customers. Mondays are also, they just have a tendency to be a phone call and a errand type day, which was the other big chunk of my day yesterday. I used to love having Mondays off when I was a cook because we were closed on Mondays, but other stuff like banks were open, which meant I could do some errands and also, just have another day of the week sometimes to do nothing else. So that was nice, especially when those other days were like Sundays and everything else was closed and I had to rest. That was helpful. Rest days. Yeah, I think that's what those are called. Anyway, we're right on the edge of a patchy frost this morning, and then we will be headed into yet another spell of 80-degree days. I'm just stunned that there hasn't been any lettuce bolting this year yet, at least, given how much heat we've had. Been a wild run of heat so far. How about you all? How's the season looking? Let us know in the comments, or as always, send us a 20-second farm video clip to farmermike@notillgrowers.com, upload it to Dropbox or Google Drive, and just share it with Mike. So cool to see your operations. We love sharing those here. Oh, and last thing, I put up a post over at patreon.com/notillgrowers last week, free to anyone. You don't have to be a Patreon member, but it has a question I'd like you all to answer over there. Essentially, you get to establish a country, a community or whatever from scratch on completely abandoned land or non-habited land. How do you go about it? We will link it in the show notes. And again, it's free, but I'd love if you would indulge me on that idea over there. We will discuss it on the show on Friday. All right, I was reading this article the other day called Scientists Filmed a Whale Birth. The Surprise Mom Had Many Helpers, written by Katrin Einhorn, whose articles I feel like we talk about on a regular basis on this show, so she definitely has the best beat at the Times there. Anyway, the article was all about how the scientists had filmed the birthing of a sperm whale calf and were stunned to see how many whales showed up to help the mom, some related, but some not at all. The helper whales lifted the calf to the surface to breathe and assisted the mother throughout the process. Quoting the article, quote, "Notably, half of the whales attending were not related to the mother. The participation of non-kin is significant to scientists because it suggests social reciprocity as opposed to a singular drive to continue a genetic line may play a role," end quote. And I think these sorts of stories are great, but also not the least bit surprising. Obviously, this is something humans do, right? There are other people who attend our births who are not necessarily kin, although, as the article says, the other whales weren't doulas or midwives exactly, but that was sort of the role they were playing from our human perspective. But it's not something we have seen that much of in nature because, well, first, wildlife births are, hard to observe in the wild because many mammals seclude themselves for safety when giving birth, so we don't, often get to watch as easily. And this is noted in the piece. This is yet another example in a long list of examples that deconstruct human exceptionalism. Pretty much whatever behavior we have that we think is unique, something else in nature does it too. Though the details are disputed by some scientists, it's clear that sperm whales also communicate and talk, with some scientists going as far as to make a phonetic alphabet of whale sounds. I don't have an opinion on that necessarily, whether or not that makes sense. But for me, I just think this idea is really important, that humans are, we're just animals. We may have more advanced technology. I mean, the fact that you can hear and or see me right now, and none of you are within earshot of me, I don't think, is case in point. But in general, our basic instincts are reflected all throughout nature, and nature is reflected all throughout us. I find that important because I find it humbling. I think the idea that we are a little more than animals on this earth is critical in understanding our roles on the planet. Shouts to Earth Day Eve. I also think that, to add to the humans are inherently good argument, perhaps, the idea of social reciprocity, that would be like helping others for the sake of helping, and so that if you're ever in need, they may come help you. that is important to see that sort of thing in the wild. It's important to see that it isn't unique to want to help others. It's just innate, literally innate. It's in our nature, because it is also something that is itself in nature. Violence is there too, of course, and greed and all sorts of good and bad things. And to that effect, we are not exactly like any one species, and no species is exactly like us. But there are these really cool echoes, and I just enjoy seeing them. So anyway, and either way, even if there is not a broader takeaway here, whales are still pretty cool. I mean, that was very fascinating. And sperm whales are notably classified as vulnerable. So, let's take care of our friends in Reciprocity, the sperm whale. We could learn a lot from them about ourselves, maybe. Any whale. Let us know your thoughts on animals, reciprocity, nature, humans, and how it is or possibly isn't all connected. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, contaminated compostination. I don't know. Sometimes these don't make sense. Sometimes they do. BRB.
Hey nerds, my name is Lydia. I live in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, and I'm a home gardener, but I have 5 kids, so I feel like I run my own farmer's market. I have behind me a whole row of onions and brassica, and a perennial bed with strawberries and medicinal herbs. Got some potatoes going, some flowers, and then a bed that's getting ready for corn and squash. I hope you all are having a great growing season. Bye.
Today's episode is brought to you by Rimmel Greenhouses. Whether you're growing tomatoes for market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a high tunnel protected from the weather provides the right environment for harvest you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality you need to grow productively year-round. The team of experts at Rimmel Greenhouse Systems will be your trusted partners to ensure you get exceptional value from your greenhouse or high tunnel investment. Visit Rimmel.com today to get growing. All right, back to the show. All right, a quick and loving reminder that if you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions now. Today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Ryan King, who writes, quote, Jesse, your show on compost/mulch safety was timely. I am increasingly concerned about the use of municipal biosolids in composting. I assumed wrongly that such compost was marketed only for use in residential landscaping, but was floored when an acquaintance recently filmed his vegetable garden beds with it. I told him it shouldn't be used for growing food, citing serious contamination issues such as PFAS, heavy metals, pharmaceuticals, and microplastics, to name a few. However, he was told it was fine for growing food by the county. The county website didn't explicitly say it was food safe, but images of vegetable gardens on their website indeed implied that it was okay. I'm concerned about biosolid compost being used anywhere, much less in food production. However, your point about the ideal versus the idea was poignant. The idea here being utilizing questionable but local nutrients and carbon, sewage sludge, and yard waste for compost might be better than alternatives, but where do we draw the line? Can you comment on the state of the science about municipal biosolid compost and the associated risks to human health, the long-term risks to contamination of native soils, how to educate the public about exposure and risk? Thank you, Ryan King, Temple, Texas, end quote. All right. Yes. Good question here. So, okay. Municipal compost often contains biosolids. That's like wastewater from toilets and houses, which themselves contain all sorts of fun chemicals, from forever chemicals, PFAS and PFOAs, pharmaceuticals, heavy metals, etc., all the things you named. Those municipal composts can also contain grass clippings from yards contaminated with persistent herbicides and various fertilizers. Oh, and just for goofs, plastics. Lots and lots of plastics. Now, can these municipal composts be perfectly fine? Sure. You could get a load that is primarily just wood chips and leaves, and it's totally fine. But you could also get the opposite, which will have long-term effects on your soil if you put it directly on there. I can't speak to the long-term human risks. I try to avoid too much, health stuff on this particular show, just because it's, the health studies are kind of all over the place, and it's really difficult to study human health. So I try and be careful with that stuff. Leave it to the doctors and specialists. But we have seen, according to reports, some links to certain cancers and birth defects, liver diseases. It's not a very pretty list, but it's also not a complete list. It's really hard to study the effects of things like PFAS, forever chemicals used for water repellent, among other things. It's really hard to study the effects of those on human health because there are almost no humans who don't have PFAS in their blood for a control. Literally something like 90% of Americans have PFAS in their blood. So it's hard to differentiate between what is the effect of the PFAS and what is just the effect of something else. And yeah, everybody. It's like you, me, and everyone we know, 90% of America. It's a lot. Per your reference to the idea versus ideal, to me, these municipal composts are waste products that should, in some cases, be used if possible. And maybe not for vegetable gardens, but like one way to do that is just time and water. Get the material, allow it to decompose further under a tarp with moisture, and that will help to eliminate at least some of those risks, with PFAS being the obviously most complicated and longest lasting one. If you can order a compost, a season ahead, for instance, then that could work and just let it chill. And then maybe once you put it down, do a cover crop. And if you don't feel good about it even then, you can take that cover crop off and remove it, and that should remove a lot of the risks. But there will always come with some risk. They are often attached to waste management plants, these municipal composting operations, and are just taking whatever organic, the general organic, meaning carbon-based waste materials, and that could be anything. So it could be anything from biosolids to yard waste, etc. But also, we just have to work on our contamination as a society. We just have to do this, it's a big ask. I get it. People love their herbicides. People love, salting their roads and waterproofing their gear and single-use plastics. So part of fighting contamination is being thoughtful about what you bring in. And the other part is changing our own habits and, beginning to bring awareness to the ubiquity of waste and pollution all around us all the time that is coming right back to us in one way or another, even if it's not directly. I don't have answers for this beyond, we need an extraordinarily fundamental shift in how we look at waste, starting with culture and ending with legislation. Contamination is a choice. It's a choice. It's a choice. It's a choice every single time. It is a choice. Every time we vote for politicians, for instance, who will stuff the EPA with leaders of special interest groups who will do everything they can to roll back any sort of regulations on things like PFAS, like the current EPA did last fall, or push for the continued use of persistent herbicides, which again, the current EPA is doing. That's a choice we've made. Anti-environmentalism candidates just mean candidates who do not care what you ingest in your water or get in your compost. They just don't. It's the opposite. These are avoidable choices, but not avoidable chemicals once the choice is made. And they affect everyone and will for many, many, many generations. Some generations even before they get started in the case of birth defects. Anyway, let me know what you all think and what your experiences have been with municipal compost. Some of you maybe have gotten good in municipal compost, but for the most part, it's something that I avoid for vegetable gardens unless you are going to take some serious time to get it composted and try and improve it a little bit. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I've got a probing question for you, sort of, or a probing topic. Is that the same thing? I don't know. Be right back.
All right, 20 seconds, you say, Jesse. Here we go. It's some chilies, capsicums, tomatoes, leeks. We have sweet potato, watermelons and rock melons. We have more chilies and capsicums. We also have more rock melon and watermelon. 2 beds ready for the garlic to go in. Some okra and some squash and zucchini. We also have celery and spring onions. We have cabbage. We have pumpkins. We have more cabbage, and we have broccoli and kohlrabi and all that stuff. There you go, Jesse. 30 seconds. I tried. Still Row Farms.
Today's episode is brought to you by Grown By. Grow smarter with Grown By, the farmer-owned cooperative. Grown By is the platform for online sales of everything, custom and traditional CSAs, halves of beef, flower bouquets, wholesale to restaurants, and now Grown By supports in-person sales too. Their new app, Grown By Register, you can supercharge your market and farm stand, finally bringing together your online and offline sales and customer data. Grown By is proud to make local food accessible by processing SNAP benefits online and in person right within the app. Grown By helps you put your best food forward. Schedule a demo at coop.grownby.com/no-till. That's coop.grownby.com/no-till. Today's episode is also brought to you by Good Agriculture. Good Agriculture handles farm bookkeeping and tax filing, so there is no scrambling at tax time. They keep your books clean and up to date and show you where your farm's finances stand. If you're behind, they'll get you caught up. They also help farmers find funding and stay ahead of grant deadlines. You run the farm, they help the business. Learn more at goodagriculture.com/info. That's goodagriculture.com/info. All right, back to the show. Okay, so testing the soil is something that many of us will do at least once a year, depending on the scale and production of your farm or gardens, etc. If you are a backyard gardener just looking to improve upon last year's or previous year's production, maybe you just test like once a year, once every couple of years, or every few even, and it just takes you like 15 minutes to gather the sample, pack it, and ship it off. If you're an acre or more, though, and you're trying to maximize your production, taking soil samples can be a pretty good sized job. If you have to test like 5 different plots and you have to get like 5 different samples from each of those those plots to mix together, then that can easily be an hour of work or more. And that can mean a bunch of holes or a bunch of samples that you need to do. And if you're certifying organic, you do have to do some sort of soil analysis every single year just to have it on your organic application. So the question becomes, do I need a soil probe and what to look for in one? Well, the backyard grower who is just on a small scale and needs maybe one sample, you probably don't need to buy a tool just for that job. A clean, non-rusted shovel or trowel will do the trick nicely. Rust may taint the sample. That's why you don't want it to be rusted. However, if you are doing a bunch of samples, it's not a bad investment to get your own soil probe for several reasons. The first is that it's faster than a shovel or trowel to use a soil probe because you just plunge it into where you want to get the sample, give it a quick twist, and then you are off and running. You pull that sample out, you've got a little core. But another nice thing is the accuracy of both the depth and the sample itself when you use a probe. For instance, when you use a shovel, it can be hard to keep the core of the sample intact and untainted by falling, like stuff falling into the sample, stuff being like grass clippings or whatever organic matter from the surface, which may give the soil lab a false impression of your soil organic matter, etc. So there's that, but there is also a consistency of depth when using a soil probe. You get exactly the depth that you want. You can measure exactly the same depth all across the garden, meaning that if you want to see how your soil management practices are doing 8 or even 12 inches down, with a long enough probe, you can do just that. Then, of course, a shovel digs a pretty nice sized hole. A probe just, removes a long core, leaving behind a smaller hole. In terms of buying a good probe, I do like a longer one for that, for the reason I just said, going deep enough into the soil to see what things look like pretty far down there. Now, there are probes that are like $200, and I assure you, unless you are an agronomist, you do not need a $200 probe. I mean, I'm not going to stop you because those are the ones that are typically tall enough that you can, use them standing up and they're really efficient. But unless you test soils multiple times a year and spend a great deal of time doing so, a 12 to 18 inch tall probe, that would be 30 to 45 centimeters, is more than enough for most people. For me, the biggest part is having one that is long enough to get that nice core right below or around the rhizosphere, and having a T-shaped probe with a secured top that is all one piece. What I mean is that if you get a probe where the top is not directly secured or securely attached to the bottom part of the probe, when you're standing on it to really push it into the soil, that top can break off or over time and just slowly loosen. And then, one day when you're pulling it back out, the top may pop off and then you just have a soil probe stuck in your soil, which is, not ideal. So a long probe, a secure top, not rusted or galvanized, obviously, though I don't know that they really make that many galvanized probes, but you don't really want one that's got that galvanization material on it. That's what stands out to me the most, and they should be under $30. And honestly, you can get a decent one for under $20 right now in most cases. I'm not going to make specific recommendations there. I've only tried a few probes in my time, but I thought I would just take a few minutes to say that if you are testing regularly, a good soil probe is nice to have around. It's also nice to just be able to see the gradation, as season after season, as that carbon kind of sinks deeper and deeper into the soil and it gets darker and darker. That's very fun to watch. Anyway, thoughts on probes, y'all? Let us know. Otherwise, we're going to get out of here till Tuesdayers. Don't forget, No Till Growers is a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That is an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Big thank you to Michelle. A big thank you to the No Till Growers Board of Directors. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you sign up in the month of April, how many ever few days we have left of it, you get a shout on the show. So big shout outs today to Peter Broad, Jason Ruel, Earth Care Farmer Jane Murner, Derek Page, Meredith Light of Granite Springs Farm, Grown Up Farm, Bob and Ann Patton of Hexhamshire Organics, Jared Kirst of Rivendell Farms, Fiona and Donnie of Firefly Farms, Mark Hare, Chris, Larry Shepard, DP, Kat Brannigan, Little Row Farms, Hank Zecca, Jill Crosby, Madison, Alberto Diaz, Norse Guard Farms, Sue Rowland, Thomas Van Wart, Tyler Lloyd, Andrea Fronti, Tassaman, Cedric Reed, William Wiley Madro, Lynn Tompkins, Steve Hurlbut, Steel Road Farms, Dongera, Hudson Carter, Jess Carr, Sonia Schwarzendruber, Adam Stickler, Robert Kilgore, Steel Road Farms, Thomas, Chris Main, and Richard Gould. Those are our pollinators. Shouts to all of our pollinators. Y'all really do keep this thing going. That's so many pollinators. All right, thank you. All right, so this week you will remember that we are following our retired teacher of 45 years, Mrs. Lydia. She's single, she's kid-free, she's 65 and ready to relax. I mean, she enjoys a good glass of wine here or there. She's not much of a partier, but mostly she just wants to relax, read, and hang out on a cruise ship, by the pool, and just visit some port towns along the way. So she heads up to Maine, and she's kind of just, gathered there with a bunch of other retired folks on the dock, and she, loads up onto the cruise ship, and it is very nice. Once aboard, she gets settled in, she, gets her book, she heads to the pool, lays down, is just relaxed, it's perfect. The cruise sets off, and a few hours later is when she hears the commotion. What commotion? That is for tomorrow, provided we get some Patreon signups on, I'm sticking with cruise control. That works for this story. Yep. All right. Thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you tomorrow. Bye.